Wow, I learned so much reading Masks, Crutches, and Daggers by Ray Armat Ph.D. It brings profound discussions from a scientific evolutionary perspective, examining how natural selection often contradicts excess wealth and power. This book looks at the current evolutionary path chosen by humans and the consequences of this sky's the limit way of living, no longer bound by nature or balance. Masks, Crutches, and Daggers is so eye-opening. We learn feedback loops that drive addictive behavior, and it's perhaps the most insightful book for anyone who wants to maintain balance, health, and longevity in their life. Not only does Dr. Armat highlight the way our brain works and the way we're predisposed to these feedback loops driven by fear, competition, but he also offers real examples of how you can avoid falling into these pitfalls in your own life. We spend thousands and thousands of dollars getting what we want and utilizing technical advancements to bypass nature. And he presents all of this information in a very respectful and interesting way. So we go through the eras of humanity, and it's easy to see how we went from foraging to then starting to evolve a little bit. Our brains changed again. We were in place more, farming, humans weren't moving as much, but then all that kind of changed again. And that's why I got this shirt on. The lemon, credited it as one of the most important fruits. The most important fruit. Why was that? Because it allowed human beings at the time to make transatlantic journeys around the world without succumbing to scurvy. Our brains are now wired to be motivated by economic gains. Human beings are actually hardwired to be conditioned by fear. Interesting studies about humans and human behavior, behavioral sciences in general. One of the ones I really liked reading about was how if you're holding something warm, you're more likely to give somebody something. But if you were just holding a cold drink, researchers found that afterwards you are more likely to take something. He really talks about how we walk a fine line between depression, addiction, and paranoia, recklessness, fatigue, and burnout. He's a graduate of Michigan and Case Western Reserve University. He's a materials scientist, chemical engineer, and a former NASA grantee and educator with years of interdisciplinary corporate research, business development, and academic experience. So it's simple language, this book, Masks, Crutches, and Daggers. It's all about the neurochemical soups that make our brain prone to metabolic imbalances, self-delusions, addiction. For updates on his next book, that should be super interesting. Homo-economicus, a guide to understanding the present and future of our denatured species. That's another thing I got from this book. We are basically going against nature in so many ways. Okay, take another case in point. Bill Gates has built a home that could fit 500 Bill Gates inside. We are the only species that goes out of our way in terms of excess. Participants were asked to be a part of a study with actors who pretended to get shocked, and the study coordinators basically said to these participants, shock these people, it's for their own good, they will learn more if you shock them. Well, by the time the study was done, the shock that these participants were delivering to these actors were enough to kill them. They'd been persuaded by the study organizers to do it. And that just shows the power of persuasion, the human brain. I think it's something wild, like 75% of the participants were willing to administer these deathly shocks. Medical practices, some practices that were widely acceptable medical literature has now been proven to be quite harmful. Take the lobotomy for an example. JFK's sister was never the same after. That's the process where they're drilling a hole in your brain to disconnect the prefrontal cortex in hopes of rectifying the depression. Instead of treating the symptom, they used to drill a hole into the brain. And many people were killed, some were irreversibly damaged. This is an example of medical practices that were once widely accepted that then became quite obviously barbaric in nature. Not only that, there's another example in that specific chapter about camels, smokes, and doctors. Quite funny, ironic there, that the doctors would be, more doctors smoke camels than any other cigarette. Again, sometimes experts can be wrong, and it just goes to show you how easily people were kind of influenced and coached and coerced in the last 3 years especially. Some really incredible questions in this book. Will masks, crutches, and daggers lead to our extinction? He talks about what those 3 things are, and he really gives some real-world examples of things we can do to counteract and to recognize that that could be happening even in the most scholarly people. You can buy it on Amazon. I learned so much. It's so insightful. Thank you, Dr. Ray Armat, Ph.D.